And so I really wholeheartedly believe that everyone should be given the opportunity to tell their side of the story, right? I do. There have been people who have called me after the interview we did on My Expert Opinion, the Mav Hoffa podcast, and said that they don't believe Shyne, that they have their own story, that they remember it differently. One of those people, even before we did the interview, was Funkmaster Flex. So, Flex said what he said, and Shyne responded on our platform, and it was like the numbers jumped because everyone wanted to hear what Shyne had to say. It's really his word, Flex's word against Shyne's word. So, I just feel like he has a right to tell his side of the story as well. And that is his side of the story.
Well, I will say this, watching that documentary, a lot of folks were giving Shyne a bad rep about the documentary, saying, you're kicking Puff's back in when he's down. But if you watch the documentary, it really wasn't that.
No, it wasn't.
It was very inspirational in terms of everything he had to go through in life to get to the point where he is a rapper, not feeling safe because of the incident that took place outside of Daddy's house where allegedly Junior Mafia, C is in the video, got into an altercation where allegedly they shot at him.
Right.
And the story that I was always told was that they were upset that he sounded like Biggie. This is what I've always been told throughout my
insider info here, guys.
Life here, in the music industry.
Yes.
And they were jealous of his success, so they wanted to end it because they felt like he was trying to be Biggie. And
did C say that in the doc? Because I didn't see that part.
Well, no, he didn't say. What he said in the doc was they were childish.
Right.
They were young and they went through an incident. He didn't get into much detail, but that's
what was word on the street.
Yeah, throughout the years, that's kind of the reason they got into that situation. So that's what prompted Shyne to always carry a gun with him because he never felt safe, and he was like this guy, now he's a millionaire and he's selling millions of records, and so that's how he was able to get the guns in the club or whatever. But what was very, very interesting in the documentary is the victim who got shot in the face and got her nose disfigured. They played clips of her interviews. She's always said that it was that Puff was the one who shot her.
Always, yes.
Always
I said this a couple of years ago. And let me just say this. Because a lot of people are saying that what you just said, you started off by talking about how people were saying that Shyne was kicking his back in. One of the things that I do know is that Shyne has been working on this story and this doc pre-Diddy's case. Yes, of course, when a company gets a hold of that and this happens, the machine is going to get behind what they believe is going to, they're going to profit off of. So, of course, they're going to push it harder now, and they're going to rush to get it out because of what we're seeing with Diddy.
He did address that in the documentary.
He's been telling that story. He's been trying to tell his whole story for a while.
But he also said that, which I found interesting in the documentary, he also said that he was not the only one to pull out guns. He didn't dismiss the fact that he pulled out his gun to defend himself because the person who actually pulled out his gun allegedly first was his friend. And he knew what type of
time they were on.
Yeah, he knew what type of time they were on because he was from the streets, his friend.
Scar,
yeah. Yes. So when he threw the money, and that ego comes in, because that's the most disrespectful thing that a person can do to another man. That's and then back then, you got to know the culture of what the game was in hip-hop. Not so much now, but back then, when you went into the clubs and stuff like that, it was all about the flash, right? How many bottles you got, how many bad chicks you got. It was a thing back then. You would be at a section 30, 40 bottles. And here you have street dudes, you have industry dudes, you have gangsters. And that came from the Nicky Barnes era. It was a thing in New York culture to be that dude, right? So I can see how that situation escalated when the money was thrown and they felt disrespected, and then, his friend is like, oh, you riding with Diddy?
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da. You come from my block, and then he pulls out his guns, but there were other guns that were allegedly pulled pulled, but he never said there were Puff guns in the documentary. Still to this day, and even in the documentary, and even through the court proceedings, he's never snitched. So like this idea that he's kicking his back and all this, like Shyne's never snitched. And he's not snitching in the documentary. You pay attention to how he's wording things.
Yeah. But this way, I've been looking at this case for years. Like, I've been looking at this case for years. A lot of people don't know, and I brought this up on the interview with him. One of the things I read years ago was that, and I don't think they could get this into court, maybe, because it was hearsay, but apparently she said who shot her when she was going into surgery that night. So she was saying it. Some people will argue, well, of course you're going to use him because he's the one with the most money. So that's what some people were saying about why she was saying that. But she's never changed her story.
But the folks that I know who's close to Puff, and even as of recently, say that she was coerced for money. That she was, but that lady has maintained.
Yeah, her story has always been the same.
She's never changed her story. And folks have saying she just basically lied for money, right?
Yeah, well, that's what they always say, right? That's what they said about Cassie when we saw Cassie's lawsuit. It's the same thing. It's always, nobody ever wants to believe a victim, right? It's always like, she must be trying to get money. It's a money grab, right? I mean, I remember I wasn't in Club New York that night. I used to go every Sunday. That was the place to be. Club New York on a Sunday night.
And see, I wasn't old enough to get in those clubs.
Club New York on Sunday.
That was the spot.
We didn't go that weekend, which is crazy to me because when I saw the next day or whenever I heard about it that night.
You didn't go?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had escaped something because we used to go, me and my friend Tia used to go to Club New York. And that night we didn't go. And every weekend we would see people. I'm sure Shyne was in there. I used to see Shyne all the time, right? But it was so lit that night, right? They were talking about Puff being in there. Puff was, how he was back then. He was in the city. He was outside. Puff was outside. Yeah. Some artists are not. Puff was outside. He had to be in the clubs. And there were a lot of street guys also, always outside. And I think one of the things that they said in the documentary was like, and I can vouch for this. Now, I'm not a street dude trying to throw money and be like, I got money too. I'm good when security push me. But what I can vouch for is security is real disrespectful.
They do.
When they're pushing an artist through. I'm not justifying anything, of course. I would never, because I would never justify. But knowing who these guys were, right? Security has always, not everyone. There's some security that understand heightened emotions and what could happen. But security is always pushing through like, excuse me, coming through, like, knocking you over. And I almost feel like some of them actually enjoy that. Like it's part of their job.
And they also want to show how loyal they are.
Some of y'all like that. Like this whole bossy, like I'm going to push the crowd and part the sea like Moses and make sure, and if you got to douche someone in the head.
You're saying that security could have de-escalated by not going so hard.
I'm saying that in the documentary, what they said that I picked up on was that when they came through, they kind of shoved these dudes, right? Like, or that, like, there was some sort of like thing where the guys were like, yo,
I got just as much money as you.
Something like that
blah, blah, blah.
He's not the only one with money in here, right?
Yeah.
And that's the energy, like, and that's very New York energy.
Yeah.
That's very New York energy. Like, we're pushing through, we in here, Puff is here, watch everybody move to the side. But you don't know who you're doing that to. And, you're in there with street dudes. Now money's getting thrown, escalating, guns are being pulled. Like, this was a big deal back then. This was a huge deal. But here's where it gets crazy to me. They started shooting in a crowded club. They started shooting. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
Like, but because also, now anyone can get it over this egotistical battle of dollars.
Putting other people's lives in jeopardy over something that's driven by ego. But what's interesting to me is that Shyne felt like his voice wasn't being heard in the courtroom.
Right.
Like he felt like there were things that his lawyers were not standing up and saying, although Shyne has said multiple times to the judge, I want these lawyers removed off of my case.
Right.
Because he felt like they were only protecting one person.
Right.
And he wasn't being protected.
Right.
I never knew that Shyne advocated for himself to get these lawyers removed off his case. But these lawyers were obviously paid by Puff's lawyers. And so I found out to be very interesting. But still through it all, he didn't give him up to the feds. He still did not give him up. Although the feds were like, oh, you know.
Yeah, they were trying to get that.
Give us the big guy, which is typical.
Right.
And all of this goes away. He still didn't, even though he felt like he wasn't being properly represented inside that courtroom that day. So.
And I believe he says, I was the fall guy.
Yeah,
right?
He definitely said he felt like he was the fall guy.
And I know a lot of stories like that, actually, you know, and I think that.
So I think it's the right thing to do. If you are going to make someone the fall guy, the right thing to do is to make sure that for the rest of their lives, they're okay. Because only you and him, or you and that person, truly knows what went down.
So.
Not saying that they did, but.
Right. I don't know. That's Shyne's story, right? I think sidebar. Did you see the part where they were talking about Puffy and Wolf going to this? They were going to like this park, and there was a bird.
Yeah.
The ritual stuff always gets me.
But see,
I always get into that stuff. I'm like,
I don't know how much. Honestly, I don't know how much that stuff is true. I mean, I just try to stay away from that stuff because it's like, how much is that is true? How much of it is sensationalized? This guy does every interview when somebody puts a microphone. I don't. For me, I don't care about that. Like,
I'm always intrigued by those. I mean, that's the.
I'm also
somebody who watch like sci-fi. I watch a lot of sci-fi.
It was funny
guys.
when
I'm
he
sorry.
said the bird died.
I watch a lot of sci-fi. Like
the bird died, and I was just
intrigued by these type of things. I'm the person that's clicking on that stuff on YouTube. It's me. I'm guilty. I'm clicking on all of the conspiracy theorist stuff. I am guilty of it. So when I saw that, I was like, what?
Yeah,
and that's not the first time I've heard a story like that. I've heard those type of stories in the industry. I'm not saying anything. I'm not going to talk about Illuminati. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to say it was in the doc. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, look at the Shyne doc. It was in the doc. There was a story in the doc that was very eerie to me. It was very spooky. It was about a pigeon, and a pigeon in the sky, and the ground, and the pigeon's dead. I don't know. I thought it was wild.
Yeah,
it was wild.
That
stuff doesn't get you.
No,
that stuff doesn't. You think those are lies?
I just look at it like you're doing too much. Like I don't get caught up in that.
But do you believe it?
No, I don't.
So you think he's lying?
I don't think he's lying. I think he will sensationalize any story that gets in front of him.
So where'd the bird come from?
I have no idea, nor do I care. But I do want to
maybe it was a Central Park pigeon.
Right, exactly.
You're like it's the story's really. They drove up to Central Park, and a pigeon was walking by, and someone kicked the pigeon. I thought the story was intriguing.
I don't get caught up in that. I just be like, why are you telling us?
I don't know, but it's...
What's the point? You want attention. You want that part to be the thing that people talk about. So look,